Welcome back to the MedTech Wealth Advisor Show. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. I'm a managing partner here and senior financial advisor at Perspective 6 Group at Focus Financial. And the goal of the show is to both educate MedTech community about financial planning and to be a resource and help when you need it. I'm joined today by Jacob LaRue, who's, of course, esteemed colleague here with us in the group. And on today's show, we're going to go over some case studies. In previous episodes, we discussed financial independence planning and our team's philosophy behind that. And so today I thought we'd follow up by just doing, a real life example, more of a case study of one of the clients that we've worked with. And specifically, we're going to focus on how we help clients reach financial independence under, some unique situations. I mean, obviously there's a lot of examples we could give, but we thought this one would be pertinent. So Jacob, why don't you give us a background on this case?
Yeah, I'll set the stage a little. So, this client might not sound too different than some of our listeners. So, mid-40 couple, they got two kids that are 8 and 10 years old. They're both working at MedTech companies, public companies right now. And they just feel like they've been kind of going really hard in terms of work life lately. So they're feeling a little burnt out, long hours, tired when they get home, and don't feel like they have time for their family. So they're kind of confused on some of their compensation too. They have some equity comp, stock options. That's what they call it. So we'll see what that actually is when we get further into the details here. But they've come to us to kind of help them make sense of their financial life and then kind of set some personal goals too. Like spending time with more family. So from there, I think, Matt, why don't we just talk about what we're going to discuss today? So when we first meet with the clients, what do we do?
Yeah. So if you remember back to the prior episode, we go through things in a specific order. And so we always want to start off with, what are your values? That's really the most important item to get the framework set. What do you want out of your life? And then once we understand that, we can, of course, dig into the specifics. What do you have today? What do you have coming in the future? And then follow that up with what gaps do we need to fill? What information do we not know yet? And we have to really get all that understanding first before you can really give advice. So again, with this case study in mind, we'll start with the first point. So we took this client through, our values exercise, and we try not to overly complicate this. But again, understanding what they want out of life is really the most important piece of this puzzle before we can give any advice. So, understanding people are coming from different backgrounds and they have different perspectives. Sometimes it's hard for people to articulate what they really want in life. And so I'll give you some example questions that we'll go through in that first meeting. We might start off with something like, what would you be doing if you had all the time and money and support to do what you love? And just, think about that. Like if you really just didn't have to worry about anything, you had everything in place, what would you be doing with your time? Where would you live? Who would you be with? Another question that I think prompts, good information in this area is, if you could improve just one area of your financial situation, what would that be? And, a lot of times there's sort of a presenting problem people come to us with, a challenge. And that may be the item we're gonna address, specifically, I don't like my portfolio, or I have this tax situation or whatever. But if you dig a little deeper, there might be one or two things beyond that. And then often we'll follow that up or kind of finish up this part of the conversation with, let's look back. Let's imagine we're 1 year out and we're looking back. Okay. What would have had to have improved for you to feel like you made good progress in your financial life? And I think sometimes that's a little easier to articulate. It relates back like, well, geez, if I'm a year from now and these one or two or three things happened, I'd feel pretty good. Well, that gives us some good direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we look at we think about this case study and the information they told us and the facts they had involved, because you were involved in this case quite heavily, Jacob, how did they end up with, what did we form for their financial freedom statement?
Yeah. So as Matt was saying, every client has different values, and what we like to do is go through that exercise and then develop what we call their financial freedom statement, which is essentially their mission statement for their life and financial life. So in this case, everything the client told us from the get-go was kind of centered around wanting more time with their family and wanting to understand their work-life balance a little better and how we could optimize that. So from there, we formed their financial freedom statement. And in this case, it was, we wish to find more work-life balance that allows us to use our resources for enjoyment today with our kids while they're impressionable, while still considering our long-term financial independence goals. So you can kind of see how at the core, they really care about their family, but at the same time, they are still concerned about their trajectory for the long term. So we got to find that
Yeah.
balance there.
And this isn't too uncommon. We'll find a lot of variations of this kind of, um, you know, live for today while being smart in the future. And the difference is, and I think the key is really to use your own language. And so, as we're trying to guide people, be that guide, we're not trying to instruct or, like impose our own ideas on the situation. We actually want to parrot back the exact words people are using, because that makes it more powerful. And so again, where I suppose you could do a psychological study on this, or it probably would boil down to really a handful of themes
Mm-hmm.
as we see across client base. They all have their own variation and way they think about it. And so that's probably what's most important, to give the power behind what we're doing.
Exactly. Yep. And then from there, once we build that financial freedom statement, we can kind of start figuring out what the client has today that could help them reach those goals. And then, like you said, a little later on, we'll talk about what we need to maybe discover a little more, dig a little deeper into. So in this client's case, we kind of just gathered some facts right off the bat. So we would look at things like their pay stub, their tax returns, investment statements. But as they said, one of the big things that they just couldn't understand was their stock options or equity comp. So getting the grant details for them on that was a big one.
In fact, we learned some different things than what they understood, didn't we, on
Yes,
this situation?
exactly. Yeah, so there was some big things that we discovered through reading those documents, and specifically with them, what they were calling stock options was more restricted stock. And we've talked about that in the previous episodes, but restricted stock is a little more straightforward. You don't have as much control on the taxes, um, not as many decisions to make. So we kind of help them uh, navigate those. But more importantly, we pointed out that their stock wasn't really vested yet. So through those grant details, we were kind of seeing the vesting schedule, and it actually wasn't going to vest for 2 more years. So if they left their employer now, they'd pretty much forfeit all that future compensation. So that opened up a really good conversation. Like, look, if you can just hold on for 2 more years, the value in this case was about $200,000. So that ended up being a big deal to them. They kind of got to see, okay, this is why I'm working so hard. There is a future outcome to it, and that allowed us to really tie it back home to their financial freedom statement in essence.
Yes, and it's yeah, that balance of living today versus the future. It just keeps coming back to this discussion. If we had just simply dove into what to do with their stock options, we wouldn't really have gotten to the essence of the
Mm.
why we're handling. So like you said, that why are they putting in the long hours and so forth. Um, well, what else? What kind of happened next here?
Yeah, so again, we're gathering as much information we can when we start a relationship. So we got that stock option detail, and we kind of talked about the tax ramifications there. But then we got some other details. You know, they had this land that they had purchased several years ago, and at one point in time, they wanted to build a new home there for their family. But you know, when work gets busy and life gets busy, those types of things often kind of fall off to the side. And in this case, they just kind of said, you know, we don't really have those aspirations anymore to take on that project. We're open to selling the land, but we're super scared about the tax ramifications. So, you know, in previous episodes, we've talked about taxes a lot. And one thing that we really needed to dig into there was kind of the coordination of what we call a tax plan. So remember, in 2 years, they were about to have all this equity compensation hit in the form of restricted stock units, which is going to be taxable that year.
Ordinary income.
Yep, at ordinary income rates. So that's a big deal. I mean, you have your salary, and then you have $200,000 on top of it in one tax year. That creates a big tax burden.
Mm-hmm.
So then with the land, what we had to do was, okay, you're open to selling it, but we actually don't know what you purchased it for, when you purchased it. So we had to get those details from them. So there's a lot of follow-up questions that go on to gather the information. But we were able to get that information for them, kind of lay out a tax projection, and it ended up being not a terrible tax situation on the land side. But they were still going to have a tax liability when they sell it at capital gains rates. So capital gains rates are a little cheaper, but you know, there was a reason to have a discussion about maybe offloading this land before the restricted stock comes due in a couple years.
Yeah, and if I remember right, the indecision had to do with, you know, well, could this land appreciate more? Like, should really we just hold on to this because, you know, X, Y, and Z are happening, and we could make some money on it to offset the taxes. But then to your point with the timing, that actually changed the discussion because of the RSU issue.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, sometimes it's not best to have two big tax issues in 1 year. So we were kind of trying to play that game a little. Just maybe we need to spread the tax impact out. And then going back to their financial freedom statement, we kind of knew that they needed a break from work. So, you know, we were looking at this land as potential value for them to spend from if they were to sell it. So if they sold the land, they get a pile of cash. In a couple of years, if they wanted to take a break, they have some cash to spend from to supplement that income that they were going to lose from their salaries and things like that. But yeah, the taxes were a big conversation, lining up when to realize certain tax liabilities, and really just trying to avoid a big tax hit all in 1 year.
Yeah, it's that constant rubric of pay more taxes, pay less taxes, higher return, less return, actual use of money, delayed gratification. And it's there's no exact formula on how to do that. So you have to pick the trade-off. There's going to be a trade-off somewhere there. But looking at the financial freedom statement, enjoying time now, enjoying time with their kids, potentially giving up a little, giving up a little potential return to have the cash earlier was more important. You know, lining up the tax situation, maybe selling one or the other first, saved a little there. So, yep, that rubric is never exact and precise. This is more art than science sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very, very much an art. You know, numbers are just numbers, but as we've discussed before, um, just because it makes sense from a math perspective doesn't mean it makes sense for the person. So,
Yeah. After that discussion, that we kind of wanted to look at the longer term picture as well. So if you remember from prior episode, why we think it's so important to build out that financial independence plan. Again, when they first came to us, this particular case, the question wasn't necessarily a retirement planning question. It started off, what can we spend now? But we needed to build out that framework of the next 20 years and how much they would need to save so that we could back into, okay, how much could you spend today? So, you know, just kind of go into how we built that out a little bit?
Yeah, that was a really big conversation that happened too, because oftentimes as people in general, we're super focused on the present, and sometimes we don't realize what those choices today, how they impact like our future results. So that's why we need to kind of look at things not only just like from a today standpoint, but from a 20-year, 30-year standpoint, like you said, Matt. So in this case, because we gathered some good data, we were able to kind of see, okay, we know what your liability payments are. We have your tax return. We know what you're paying in taxes. We got your pay stub. We know what you're saving to your 401k. So now everything else that hits your bank account, we can kind of back into what you might spend just on your everyday expenses. So groceries, entertainment, utilities, things like that. So that's how we kind of develop what they could spend today, and then we kind of like to just carry that out because more often than not, people don't want to decrease their lifestyle. If anything, they want to increase it in retirement or as they have more freedom. But so that's where we play that game again is okay, do we have things planned out to meet the expenses you're going to need for the next 5, 10, 20 years? And then on top of that, we need to build in these travel goals that you guys had told us about. If you take a sabbatical, how's that going to impact things? I mean, sabbaticals can be expensive, especially if you're doing world travel. So all those levers are things that we go through with clients and kind of just show them, okay, if we do this, it might cause this in the future. So that we got to find that balance there too.
When you have sort of a steady income and just regular cost of living adjustments and sort of a little bit of steady equity compensation or business income, doing those long-term projections is a little bit easier because it's kind of an upward 45-degree line in general. But in some cases we'll have, it's like in this case, probably putting in more effort than is sustainable for 20 years. So they're making significant salary and significant equity comp, and they may, like we talked about, may actually need a break. So having a framework as if it's steady then helps to kind of make decisions based on these really lumpy income flows and start and stops, sabbaticals, etc. Because of course those are unpredictable. We can throw those in as what ifs, but we don't know when that's going to happen. We can easily see a client, let's just assume, we have the conversation. Let's just assume that you're going to retire in 20 years. We don't know. Let's just use that as a number. Call it a what if. And then what if number 2 is you take a sabbatical in 2 years and then you come back to an income that's half what you're earning today. All kinds of those scenarios can be thrown in to just get people thinking, to just imagine what's possible. But without that general long-term, almost like baseline scenario, it's kind of hard to think about these what if scenarios.
Exactly. I like what you said too. The equity comp side of things is so lumpy that oftentimes we get clients that, they get a $200,000 stock option grant or something like that, and they don't have a plan in place for what to do with that cash. So then it just ends up getting spent. So in this client's case, if we didn't dig into those details and kind of show them, hey, this money could be used for a 1 to 2 year sabbatical type of thing, they probably would have just spent it on something that didn't really fulfill what they wanted out of their life. They might have just gone out to eat with friends instead of really taking travel with their family that they wanted to. So that's what I love about this type of thing.
Yep. Yeah. And 200,000, while no small numbers, maybe on the small end too, some of these situations can be life-changing money. And that really needs to be planned ahead for and so forth. So yeah, very good. I mean, I hopefully it's helpful just to kind of go through the general framework again that we talked about last episode, but with some more specifics, some more real life example to it. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to add kind of on this study for now?
Yeah, I think for now that's probably it for this one. We'll probably revisit this in a future episode and kind of dig into like the investment plan side of it and maybe the risk management side of it, because today was really just about what do they have today, what are they spending, and kind of what do they value. So there's other parts of their plan that we'll dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good. I think that's it for today. I mean, thanks listeners so much for joining us, talking about the financial planning case. And if you know anybody that needs guidance like this, just click the share button, send it to them directly. If you're a fan of the show, leave us a review. It really does help us out. And you can always subscribe. Make sure you get this content delivered to your inbox on a regular basis. If you just want to know a little bit more about the team at the MedTech Wealth Advisor, which is really the Perspective 6 group, check us out at our website, perspective6group.com. That's perspective, the number 6 group.com. You can also call us. It's 952-225-0333. And finally, if you have suggestions for future topics, love to hear about those. We always like to know what listeners want to hear. So you could send us a line at mwapodcast@focusfinancial.com. So mwapodcast@focusfinancial.com. So it wouldn't be possible without you, MedTech community, and the retiree community that we serve as well. So until next time, just remember, financial freedom takes a lot more than money. So find your purpose and make a plan to live your life well. If you need guidance, we're here to help you. Take care of each other out there.